Hey tubers, welcome back for another adventure. And during this adventure, we're going to talk about China all-terrain vehicles. It seems that when I work on these things, I get a tremendous amount of feedback. It seems that some people like them and some people just don't. But no matter what, seems that everybody has an opinion to share with me. As one could see pretty quickly, there are quite a few of these in my collection. So let me tell you guys what I think about them. As you guys saw from the video, I seem to own enough of these things. And many of you may say, why? You have Hondas, you have everything else. What's so good about them? Why would you consider these worth owning? So, the good thing about these is typically you could buy them used and broken crazy cheap. Anywhere from $25 to $50 is what I'm willing to pay. And they come in all various sizes for that money. This is a small one, a little 70cc. I own 90s. 110s, 125s, even a 200cc model, and a few 150 GY6 versions. So that's the first thing. Used, you can buy them cheap. The second thing about them is they are really easy to work on. Take an example. This is a 90cc. You remove like 2 or 3 bolts and the engine's right off the frame. About parts, most of the parts are cheap, easy to find on eBay, and they're even interchangeable. You can swap a lot of parts from one to the other. The last one was a 90, this is a 125, and you can see the starter swaps, this case swaps, carburetor swap, everything moves from one to the other. The other great thing about this, everything you need to do on these, you can learn on one of these before you buy yourself a Honda, Suzuki, Yamaha, Kawasaki. And it's good if you're going to make a mistake and perhaps break something, if you could get the parts easy. I know I'm currently working on Kawasaki's at the time right now, and I'm finding the parts, first of all, hard to kind of lay one's hands on at a reasonable price. I mean, anybody could go to the dealer and pay full price and make it hurt, but I really want to buy a lot of the parts reasonable. When you're putting stuff in a 30-year-old machine, I don't need to put a timing chain in there that's guaranteed for the next 100 years. I'm going to get it running. I'm going to ride it around my yard a little bit. Eventually, my sons will ride it around their yards. But a $20 timing chain will do. I do not need to put $150 timing chain in. Where this thing, I could buy that timing chain for $6 or $7. Okay, let's take a few minutes talking about the bad. And by the way, there are some bad things about these things. First of all, the reason why the parts are cheap and easy to get is because they're cheap. The quality isn't quite what they should be. These things do break down a lot. Typical fail that I find on these things is that the carburetors like to gum up. They don't use very good metal to build the carburetors out of. They have a tendency to oxidize. Before you know it, the jets are plugged up and it won't start. From that, normally the next thing that happens is the battery goes bad, and then you have a tire do that. The plastic, if you leave them out in the weather, the plastic goes to heck really quick, especially for these $600 really cheap models. It's a matter of a year or two, or if you put weight on it, as you put the tarp on it and the tarp sits on it and leans on it, the weight from the snow just snaps the fenders right off. So they are cheap. And I'm going to use the word junk But if it's the only thing you have to ride, it's the only thing you have to ride. So, I alluded to cheap metal. Take note of how this frame is repaired. Unless one is filming a redneck, this is how I'm going to die video, one should not be jumping these things, especially if you have a 200-pound frame like me, who's riding on this thing. You know, if you run it over jumps, it is going to break. And as a matter of fact, one of my YouTube friends had one of these where he broke it up front, and it dove into the ground, and he broke his face up pretty good. So these things are not meant to jump. If you put a 80, 90, 100-pound kid on this thing, and you have them riding around the lawn and spinning donuts and all that kind of stuff, this thing will last a good long time. If you put a 200-pounder like me and you start running it over jumps, it will not last a long time, and chances are I'm going to follow it in its death spiral. Something's going to break, and I'm probably going to get hurt. So once again, unless you're making, redneck, this is how I'm going to die videos, do not jump these. Do not ride these like they're stolen. If you're riding it like that, you might want to ride it like, boy, I hope I have good health insurance. So, my suggestion for these things. For myself, I would never buy one new. If I was going to spend the $600 to $1,200, I would buy a used Honda, Kawasaki, Yamaha, Suzuki, something like that. I would never, ever buy one of these new. Secondly, even if you're going to buy them used, I would make sure I know how to work on them, or I have a buddy that's going to teach me how to work on them, because even your buddy that works on them isn't going to want to fix yours all the time. So learn to work on them, and they're a good place to learn that. It will break down for you plenty. It'll be no time at all. I bet you within the first year or two that you own it, that you'll be into the carburetor if it's running. If it's not running, I bet you'll be in the carburetor in no time at all trying to get it to run. Things change out on these really easy. I have one in the garage that's loose, and let me show you. Here we have a typical 110cc engine. This is the single speed model, the centrifugal clutch model. As a matter of fact, I was asked recently about, hey, my centrifugal clutch won't disengage, what do you think is wrong? There's a spring in here. If that spring breaks, your clutch will not disengage, your shoes will continuously drag. If that fills up with debris, it could hang up. And also you can see this thing is well worn, right? The bearings are going out on it. Quite honestly, it could just be worn to the point where it's twisted. It could be binding up in the output gear or something else. Anyway, but working on these things, really a piece of cake, right? You take this cover off, you're right in on the centrifugal clutch. Not difficult to take that apart. Right, there's the oil pump. You could see what this thing probably died of right here. Right. Yeah, I picked up this engine out of somebody's scrap pile for free. And quite honestly, the whole head, jug, all that is good. The starter is good. If I needed it, I could pull the crank out of it. This side is the stator cover side, the stator side, the flywheel side. What you have here is you have the flywheel sits on it with the one-way clutch, the chain for starting it up, right? The timing gear the timing chain is beneath this. If I were to change it, I would pull the jug off, spread a link, so to speak, hook the new chain to the old, feed it through and around. Right, no use tearing this whole thing apart. Just simple, right? This single speed, you can see there's really really nothing to it. But all the stuff you got to mess with, it's just like a Honda, right? The carburetors are Honda clones. The whole timing chain situation, same as a Honda. A lot of Hondas, especially the old stuff, they have points up in here, or they have a pulse generator up here. On these, it's just the pulse generators down here. But you still got the stators, still got the pulse generator, the CDI unit, you know, all the stuff on these is exactly the same as a Honda. So if you're going to learn by taking something apart, it's much better, cheaper, just in case something goes wrong or you break parts or whatever, to do one of these. The nice thing also is these engines, these 110cc engines, are like very available. You can find them all over the place. And should you decide to swap an engine out with a new eBay version, I think you could get the single speed for somewhere around 250 plus or minus 50. I've seen them as low as 99, and I've seen them up at 300, so 250 plus or minus 50 for the single speed. For the 3-speed, it's going to be a little more money. So let me conclude. I own a lot of these, and I own them because they are cheap. They are good to learn on. Really good to learn on, because everything you do on these you will have to do on another bike. If it's the difference between walking and riding, especially if you're a young person or an old person who doesn't have a lot of money, you know, these are not a bad place to start. As long as you're not going to go too crazy and jump them or do any of that other stuff, they'll work. You do have to fix them, so learn how to fix them. If you're not going to fix it, don't own it, because you will have to fix this, and you will have to fix it frequently. Once you get them into a routine, and by a routine, I mean you get good gas in them, you get the carburetor rebuilt, you get the gas tank flushed out, you make sure there's no water, you ride it regularly to keep the battery charged, to keep the tires aired up, and to keep gas going through it. If you do that, they will run. Okay, if you leave them out in the sun, the plastic will go bad. If you leave them out in the weather, the gas will go bad, the electrical connections will go bad, and you'll have trouble with the spark. But you could replace the entire wiring harness, ignition system, switches, starter relay, everything for 30 bucks on eBay. You just have to figure how to get it back, get the old one off and get the new one on, which requires all the plastic, seat, a lot of clips have to come off. I mean, snaking the new wire harness on is a little bit of work, but it could be done, and it's only 30 bucks. A lot of times the plastic they use for the gas lines, not very good, and the plastic gas tank is not very good. On a lot of these, you could get an exact replacement gas tank, fairly reasonable, or you could get one of them little gas tanks and cob it on there, fairly reasonable, less than 10 bucks. So, do I own them? Yes. Do I like them? Yeah, I mean, you could get on them and ride them and so forth. Do I prefer Hondas? Oh yeah. I'd spend 500 bucks on a Honda before I spent 200 bucks on one of these, and even if one of these was in halfway decent shape, right? I'd much prefer a Honda. Why do I buy them? They're cheap. I can make videos about them. You know, I like working on them. They're easy to work on. So that's why I own them. Anyway, I still get a lot of comments about these. I figured I'd make a video for anybody out there who's considering one. I want to thank you all for dropping by to watch and comment and subscribe. Please remember to keep your feet down, your heads up, and get out and work each and every day. Get out and enjoy each and every day. And most of the time that includes work. Bye now.